我们以为巴以停火协议已经生效，但恐怕没有想到的是，它是有多么的脆弱。
Just hours after a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into force this morning, there were clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians around the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the old city of Jerusalem.
一周前，也就是当地时间5月21日，以色列和加沙地带的巴勒斯坦武装组织哈马斯在交火11天后，终于达成了停火协议。但之后，生成耶路撒冷圣殿山的阿克萨清真寺外又发生了冲突。昨天，也就是当地时间的26号，哈马斯给出了警告，说如果以色列接着侵犯阿克萨清真寺，那哈马斯将重新打击以色列。所有的这一切都像是5月初冲突发生的重演。嗨，大家好，我是徐涛。我知道在数天前我们访谈 Salah 的那一期引发了很多争议。Salah 讲述了他作为身处以色列的中国人是如何感受到战争威胁的。我们在那期节目中的确是只讲述了一方的感受，而另外一方的声音缺失了。因此在这期节目中，我们也联系到了巴勒斯坦人 Salah。 Hi Salah.
Hi, how are
Hi,
you?
I'm Tao. Good, how are you?
Thank you, I'm good.
他的祖辈曾经生活在现处以色列境内的小村庄，在以色列建国后，他的全家被迫成为难民，迁徙到了约旦河西岸地区。疫情到来之前，他开一个小旅店，带着外国游人旅游为生。疫情的到来使得他几乎失业，而后续巴以冲突更让他觉得这片土地多灾多难。我们这一次的采访是在停火之前的5月19日。采访后的第二天，哈马斯发射了更多的火箭弹，而以色列则轰炸了包括新闻机构在内的加沙民用建筑。所以通过 Salah 的讲述，也许我们能够理解为什么这个地区的和平会如此脆弱，而世代积累的仇恨又如何让以色列和巴勒斯坦人的和平相处看起来如此渺茫。那这一集是全英文，如果不介意的听众可以留在这一集。当然我们也做了中文版本，由我的同事 Luke 用中文转述了 Salah 的讲述，大家可以找到标题中注明中文转述的这一集来收听。也感谢我们的听众蔡小媛，是他联系了 Salah 给我们。那和驻以色列的中国姑娘 Sally 的那一集一样，以下我就全交给 Salah 来进行讲述。
I was born in Bethlehem City, where I live today, which is in the West Bank. But originally, my family come from a village called Zakaria. Zakaria, my village, as well as many other villages, was occupied by Israel in 1948. And that's why my grandparents became refugees, and my parents and me myself. Why? Because according to the international law, Palestinian refugee status go through the generations. So if your grandparents are refugees, you are also a refugee until there is a solution between Palestinians and Israelis. I work as a tour guide, and I run my own hostel, like a small hostel, 5 rooms hostel. Mm-hmm. I run the cultural, political, and historical alternative tours of Palestine.
And that's your daily job, right? You are the owner of the hostel.
That's my daily job. A year ago. Now there is no job.
No job.
Because of Corona, we're all unemployed. Everybody that works in tourism is unemployed now. The situation in the West Bank is boiling. It started about a month ago. It's just the world doesn't see it from the beginning. It started all in Jerusalem around the beginning of Ramadan, the first week of Ramadan, when Israel and Israeli police decided they wanted to prevent the people of Jerusalem from having their daily activities. In Ramadan, every night, people meet, dance, eat, sit in public areas and places. But Israel wanted to limit them. And also, they wanted to limit the number of Palestinians praying in the mosque, in Al-Aqsa Mosque, just because they want to keep it empty for Israeli Jewish settlers, conservative settlers, to go in without being bothered by Muslims.
For several nights, the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, Islam's third holiest site, witnessed clashes between Palestinian protesters and Israeli police. These clashes then spiral into a barrage.
This is the second holiest place in the world for Muslims and the most holy place for Muslims in Palestine and all the Middle East. This is the holiest month in the year for Muslims, which is Ramadan. And still Israel wanted to provoke the Muslims by bringing Jewish extremists into their holiest place while these people are worshipping there. They knew there are going to be a lot of clashes if they do that. And that's why they wanted to limit the number of the Muslims who can go and pray in the mosque to 10,000 instead of keeping it open. Normally, this place can host up to 250,000. So 200,000 people can pray there. This is the most important place in the area, and it's a very special place for Muslims in such a month. That's one thing. Another thing, this place is not under the Israeli authority. It's supposed to be under the Jordanian mandate and authority. So Jordan is the international country that can decide what goes on there. But since Jordan doesn't have any force inside Jerusalem, Israel basically applies its own force against the international law and against the agreements with Jordan. So basically, they wanted to take over the place by reducing the Muslims' access to this place. Hamas and Palestinians asked Israel to stop forcefully kicking out the Palestinians from their houses. Now, the story behind these people, it's a group of Palestinian refugees who lived in this neighborhood, which is called Sheikh Jarrah. This neighborhood, they were moved to this neighborhood in 1950s, beginning of 1950s. Why they were moved there? Because Israel, when they occupied their villages and cities, the villages of the city and the cities of these people, who originally are from Jaffa, Israel took their houses there and took their land there, and they became refugees. At that time, this land was under the control and the mandate of Jordan, okay, which is East Jerusalem. Now, Jordan had an agreement with the UNRWA, which is the Palestinian branch of the UN, the United Nations, to build houses for these people in this area here. Now, this area is not owned by the Jews whatsoever, as the Jews are claiming. In 1880s, this place was rented to a Jewish person, who was rented to him for 90 years, which means this place was already, like the contract was already over in the 1970s. So they have no ownership claim for the place, but they forged documents to say that they own the place instead of that they rented the place. And this happened in 1990s, because in 1972, these Jewish Israeli organizations claimed that they owned the place. They couldn't prove it. In 1990s, a lawyer who was representing the Palestinian families took their documents and forged them and gave them to the Israelis, claiming that they sold them to them. Now, this was proven that it's fake papers, but Israel, an Israeli jurisdiction, an Israeli court, did not accept the original documents coming from Jordan that these lands and these houses are owned by these people. It was not officially registered in 1967 because of the war, and it stayed like that. So, simply speaking, Israel wants to take the houses and the land of these people, which were already made refugees by Israeli occupation 1948, about 73 years ago, and make them refugee again and make them homeless again. Because none of these people have a house to go live in. This is their whole life in that place. Now, this has created a lot of anger among the people, among the Palestinians in general. Israel is trying to ethnic cleanse the people from Sheikh Jarrah area, and at the same time, Israeli terrorist groups like Lechia, like Ben Gvir, and many other people that are known for their very radical terrorist ideologies, at the same time, they started targeting and harassing Arabs of Israel, Palestinians who are living inside Israel. They started attacking houses, they started attacking shops, shooting at people, throwing Molotov cocktails into houses, attacking people in different areas in different places. The first episode was attacking people sitting in front of Damascus Gate. The second episode was attacking people inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The third episode was attacking people in Sheikh Jarrah and attacking Palestinians living across Israel. And the fourth episode was shooting people inside Al-Aqsa Mosque. 400 people were shot inside Al-Aqsa Mosque while worshipping, while praying. And that's when Gaza decided to interfere. That's when Hamas threatened Israel. If they don't get their hands off the mosque and the people, they would interfere. We didn't think it's going to go all the way to this point because we didn't expect Israel is crazy enough or Netanyahu is crazy enough to go and shoot people inside the mosque. He did it before, but he didn't do it that violently. 1 or 2 years ago, he did the same thing inside the mosque. Israel is not only using rubber bullets and tear gas. They're using rubber bullets, tear gas, live ammunition, stun grenades, skunk water. More than 35 Palestinians, I think, 30 to 35 Palestinians were killed across the West Bank in these clashes. Personally, I'm against violence. But when somebody starts violence, the only expected reaction you can get is another violence. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it logical. This is something that is happening every couple of years. Like every couple of years, there is an escalation of the violence between Palestine and Israel. Why? Because this is an ongoing conflict for 73 years and it was never solved. In 1948, Israel evicted 80% of the Palestinian population outside the country. Should we allow Israel to evict us again? If we stay silent as we were in 1948, because we didn't have weapons, we couldn't fight back, and that's why they managed to evict us. Israel was well armed, was well trained, and they had all the power to evict and attack Palestinian innocent villages. More than 70 massacres has been committed in 1948 against the Palestinian population. Thousands and thousands of people were killed. Total villages were massacred. You would go into a village and you would see 300-400 people killed. In 1948, when you talk about 300 people in a village, that's the whole village. And Israel kicked out more than 780,000 people from their houses and villages in 1948, more than 350,000 in 1967. So in total, we're talking about more than 1 million direct refugees that were forced to leave their villages and cities in 1948 and in 1967, just because we couldn't defend ourselves. Today, Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. They basically go and bomb a whole street. Sometimes they call the people half an hour before the bombing. Sometimes they call the people 5 minutes before the bombing. Now, when you call a building, one person in the building, you call him 6 minutes before the bombing. Okay, then you bombard that building, a building which has 10 floors. How this person is going to inform everybody in 6 minutes, and then they would leave safe. I have a good friend that I knew through TikTok because I've never been to Gaza. I only know my friends through social media. This friend has 7 daughters. He divided his family into 3 different houses because he told me if one house is bombed, I would have some people left in other house. I wouldn't lose all of my children. Imagine that. My friend was talking to me today morning while the bombing was 20 meters away from his house. He's still alive. But every time he talks to me, he says, take care, just in case I can't call you next time. That's every time we talk. They don't have shelters. Besides, Israel is using bombs specially for shelters, and they don't shoot them on shelters because there are no shelters in Gaza. They shoot them on civilian buildings. Israel, this time, is targeting all the high buildings in Gaza. In Gaza, there are about, 15, 20 towers that are 15 to 20 floors each. These towers are basically the heaven of the people in Gaza. Gaza is flat. It's a seacoast. So it has no mountains, has no lakes, no rivers, no forests, nothing. It's just a flat seacoast. So when people want to have some fun, they wouldn't be able to go to empty areas because empty areas are next to the border with Israel, and anybody gets any close to these borders gets shot immediately. So people don't go there. Where they go to these high buildings. Each one of these high buildings have cafes, it has schools, it has NGOs, it has gyms, it has all the important things. Why? Because simply Gaza doesn't have electricity and it doesn't have clean water. So when people want to get electricity, they get it 3 to 4 hours a day. Israel controls that, so they don't get enough electricity. But the high buildings have their own generators in them. Why? Because people collect money together, buy a generator, and have electricity all the time when people are there. They shut and destroyed these high buildings because that's how they target the soul and the spirit of the people.
在这里做一下补充，就在我们采访的前一天，位于加沙境内的加拉大楼在遭到以色列军方的空袭后倒塌。这是一栋商住两用建筑，特殊之处是它是当地美联社与半岛电视台的办公所在地。以色列军方只是提前了约1个小时通知大楼的所有者，随后4枚火箭弹将大楼夷为平地。
They targeted journalism and journalists. Yesterday, for example, they bombarded the house of a Palestinian journalist living inside Gaza. Now, Israel is claiming that they have very precise targets. Okay, so either they're lying and they're bombing randomly, or they're true and they are honest and they're targeting journalists, schools, health centers, and so on. For instance, the whole world is suffering from corona nowadays, right? Israel yesterday bombarded the only health center in Gaza that can test for COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
They bombarded. Now they can't make tests in Gaza. In the first place, they were making a health apartheid system by not giving Gaza their share of the vaccines. Gaza has 2 million people. They only allowed 80,000 vaccines to go into Gaza. They bombarded the health center that tests for COVID. They bombarded the schools that are used by the international organizations like the UN, the Red Cross. They're using a couple of schools as shelters for the people who lose their houses. Yesterday, Israel announced they're going to bombard these shelters. Nobody can leave Gaza. Gaza is the biggest jail in the world. Gaza is surrounded by Israel from air, from sea, from land. Gaza is the biggest concentration camp in the world. It's a prison with 2 million people in it. Even when people want to go and, when fishermen want to go and fish in the sea, they're not allowed to go in the sea more than 3 miles. Israel starts shooting at people when they are on the beach. Every Palestinian city in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and everywhere, there are points for protesting against the oppression and to support Gaza, to support Jerusalem, to support Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, and to support Palestinians inside Israel that are under Israeli oppression. There are more than 200 points of protesting across the West Bank. Bethlehem alone has at least 10 points of protesting. And the attack that is on the Palestinians, whether they are in the West Bank or inside Israel or in Jerusalem, are not only by the Israeli military and police, but also by the Israeli settlers, like Israeli civilians that are living illegally inside the West Bank, carrying weapons, carrying bombs, carrying knives, shouting death to Arabs, and sending messages to each other, calling for genocide, calling for even, I read some messages, calling for holocausting Palestinians, castrating their women, killing the children before they grow and become terrorists. It is super hard, I'm telling you. Like, I've been living here my whole life. I'm 35 years old. The things I'm seeing now is the worst things I've seen in my life. And I've seen very bad things. I've seen the Israeli F-16 bombarding Bethlehem. I've seen the Israeli F-16 coming into Bethlehem and dropping its bombs in the middle of the city of Bethlehem, the holiest city for Christians in earth, the place where Jesus was born. I've seen the church where Jesus was born surrounded by Israeli military and tanks for 40 days. 9 people were killed inside the Church of Nativity in the year 2002. So you can imagine how bad it is today if that is not bad enough to be compared to this one to me. I don't think there should be two countries. I think there should be one country. One country for both Palestinians and Israelis to live together in peace. Let's do it like that, basically. Make it like South Africa. One country, and everybody votes. Because otherwise, we're not talking about ending the problem. We're talking about managing it and maintaining it. Israel doesn't want it. Palestinians are more willing to accept such a solution. The one-state solution was offered by the Arab nations and the Palestinians in 1947, before the division happened. When the British offered the division, we said, no, we don't want a division. We want one country for everybody. And they refused even to let us put it in the UN for voting. The Zionists at that time realized that they only own 5.7% of the land of Palestine. The land of Palestine, which is called Mandate Palestine, the map that was created in 1910, and then it was turned into what we know in 1922, the final touch. At that time, 1947, the Jews and the Zionist movement, their organizations, owned only 5.7% of the land. And they were given almost 60% of the Palestinian land. They were given 57% of the land. While they were a minority at that time, they were less than 30% of the population, about 29% of the population. So they owned very little land, and they were given a lot of the land, while the Palestinians, who were about 71% of the population, they were given only 42% of the land. And then 1% was Jerusalem and the surrounding areas, which was called to become an international zone. Israel had in mind, oh, listen, why should I share the whole country with them while I can get more than half of it only for myself while I don't own any land? If it is a one country, they can't control a lot of the land since they only own 5.7% of the land. And that's why they refuse to have one state. Nowadays, we're talking about a very oppressive Israeli leadership, a dictatorship that has been in the power for the last 15 years. When he felt that he's losing power and he might go to jail for corruption, I'm talking about the Israeli president, he provoked a new clash with the Palestinians. That is even blames and criticizing against him inside the Israeli community itself. And that's why, from the beginning of the conflict, I said, this was created by Benjamin Netanyahu. Any Palestinian or Israeli get harmed by this conflict should go and sue Netanyahu in the court. I don't know if you know, but there is an apartheid wall probably as long as the China Great Wall. About 800 kilometers wall. Israel has built this wall around the Palestinian cities. And that's why we don't call it separation wall. We call it confiscation and expansion apartheid wall. Because it's built in a way to confiscate as much as possible land and to allow the settlements and the Israeli cities to expand in our land. For instance, the wall in Bethlehem is 6 kilometers deep in the border in the Palestinian side of the Green Line. So how Israel wants to separate between Palestine and Israel and make borders, while they build the border in our land, and more than that, they have 600,000 to 700,000 of their settlers and illegal residents living on our side of the wall, stealing more of our land. It is not a two-state. It is a one-state, but it's an apartheid state. If you oppress me, I will hate you. That's what is happening. People are being oppressed, and that's why they hate the oppressor. When you know that there is no single Palestinian house that was not directly and personally, at least one person of each Palestinian family, each Palestinian house, have been directly harmed by the Israeli occupation. Not even single one. You can't find any single house that wasn't harmed. More than 360 checkpoints across the West Bank. If I want to go from here to Nablus, which is only about 80 kilometers, 80, 90 kilometers, something like that, it takes me sometimes about 4 hours. Imagine driving 80 kilometers in 4 hours. That's like traveling from one to another country. Just because there are so many checkpoints, so much harassment, and so much unfair and injustice in the way. In many cases, the soldiers would stop you and just have a chat with each other while you're waiting. Very much inhumanity. The other day, I was with my group of friends. We went for a tour because we were so fed up of being locked down. We went for a hiking tour. In the way back, the Israelis stopped our bus, arrested our bus driver, and they kept us outside the bus for 2 hours at 10 o'clock in the night in a very cold weather. This was about 3 months ago, 2 to 3 months ago. It was very cold. One of the women who fell down on the ground unconscious, and they didn't even allow me to go on the bus, get the spirit to put it on her nose so she would wake up. They arrested the bus driver because his brother was arrested for political activities about a month or two before that. And they have a tradition. Whenever they arrest anybody, they would investigate the whole family. Now, if somebody doesn't feel like going to be harassed, investigated, and put in jail for a few days, and doesn't go to the Israelis when they ask him to go, he becomes a wanted person. And that's what happened with our bus driver. He became wanted because his brother was arrested. In Palestine, Israel is violating human rights on a daily basis. First of all, it's a country that is based on apartheid. There are so many ways and pictures and images of apartheid and racist division between people according to where they come from. For example, in the West Bank where I live, if you are an Arab or a Palestinian, you are under the Israeli military law. If you are Jewish settler who is illegally staying in the West Bank, you are under the Israeli civilian law. So applying two different laws in one geographical area, depending on your race and depending on where your background is from, is a 100% apartheid system. Other than that, there are many different other ways of apartheid. For example, Israeli plate cars can go all over the place. They can go to Israel, they can come to Palestine, the yellow plate cars. Palestinians are driving white plate cars. So we're not allowed as Palestinians to drive the Israeli plate car, which is the yellow. And our cars are not allowed to be in Jerusalem, for instance, or in Nazareth or in Haifa. So we can't go with our cars to their cities, but they can come with their cars to our cities. That's another way of apartheid. Sometimes also there are total roads, whole roads that are specialized for Israelis. Neighborhoods that they build inside Palestinian territories are Jewish-only neighborhoods, which means Palestinians are not allowed to go and live in these neighborhoods, even if they can prove that they own the land in these settlements. Israel doesn't allow them to build houses there. So that's another form of apartheid. Even when you are a Palestinian who is carrying the Israeli citizenship, there is still many forms of apartheid against you. For instance, Israeli cities are built in a very modern way. Arab cities in Israel are built in a very backward way. They are not organized. They don't have good communication and transportation like Israeli Jewish cities. They can't expand as they need. Israeli cities are very, very modern. They have all different services, and they can expand whenever they need. On the contrary, they expand even when they don't need, because for them, expansion is a form of colonialism and taking over people's land. And that's why you can see that they are building houses that have no people in them, just because this is a fact on the ground that they can take over the land as they want and as they wish. Palestine is not a strong country. Palestine has a government, but it's not an independent country that could have its own resources. Why? Because Israel is controlling all of our natural resources. 60% of the land in the West Bank, that is Palestinian land, is under full Israeli military control, which means if I own a land in sea area, and I want to build a house, I have to get the permit from Israel. Israel never ever gives permits for Palestinians to build in these areas unless there is a political agreement behind it. This is a Palestinian land. This is a Palestinian area. Why don't you allow Palestinians to build in it? And instead, you do a war crime by allowing Israeli settlers to build in it. Because this is a war crime and against international law to use the lands of Palestinians in construction, in investment, and things like that. For instance, there is a beach only 1 hour away from here. In order to use that beach, I need to go and pay Israel to use the beach. I have to pay about $20 in order to be able to use my own beach. And this money doesn't go to my country, it goes to Israeli country. In order to go to some beautiful archaeological and historical sites in the West Bank, a lot of them are under Israeli control, and I have to pay an entrance fee to the Israeli Ministry of Antiquities so I can use these places. I'm a tour guide. I know a lot of these places and how they turned a lot of these important places, whether water resources, archaeological sites, sea sites, infrastructure areas, and stuff like that, into military zones and settlements in order to control them and get the money out of them. If Israel leaves the Palestinians alone, we get a very good life. We don't need anybody's support. The gas of Gaza in front of the Gaza coast is the biggest gas reserve in the world. For decades, Israel now is stealing it. They have their gas stations inside the sea, in front of the Gaza shores, taking the gas from there. Why do you think they're not allowing Palestinians to have their normal 30 miles water seaside? Because they want to keep controlling the gas until they finish it. So many natural resources that we own, we can't control and we don't get advantage of. If you don't have control over the borders, you don't have control over the water, you don't have control over the seaside, you're not allowed to have an airport, you're not allowed to have your own currency. If you can't protect yourself, how can you have a strong economy? Israel should start slowly and rapidly change the situation for Palestinians under occupation. They should start by lifting the barriers, start by lifting the checkpoints in the West Bank at least, and then slowly start giving Palestinians more rights of travel. Give the Palestinians a right to vote freely, to speak freely. And then take the Palestinian prisoners outside the jails. More than 4,500 Palestinian prisoners inside Israeli jails today. Hundreds of them are women and children. Hundreds. Hundreds of them have no case against them in the court, which we call administrative detention, which is when you go to jail without a trial, without a case, and without a crime. They just put you in jail just in case, because they have something maybe against you, but they can't prove it. Or they have something they think you might have done it, but they can't think what it is. At least 250 Palestinians are inside Israeli jail graves, because not everybody that dies in jail goes home. In many cases, they would keep the body until the body finished the sentence. They should start treating Palestinians as humans. They should remove the military law of the West Bank. When a Palestinian commits a crime, an Israeli commits a crime, they should take the same punishment. When people start seeing this, they would start accepting living together with Israel. We don't have a problem with the people. We have a problem with injustice. Palestinians, of course, I'm against it. I'm against any violence of any type. But just to let you know how the mechanism of resistance happened. People would fight with whatever mean they have in order to become free. At one point, Palestinians didn't have anything but stones, so they fought with stones. Next, they used white weapons, like knives and slingshots and stuff like that. So they used them. Then they used the glass bottles, then they used them. Then they had more violent stuff like a Kalashnikov here, an old gun there, they used them. And then, why is that? Because occupation is becoming stronger every time. So the more stronger the occupation and the more offensive the force Israel is using, the more the Palestinian resistance become. For about 18 to 19 years, Palestinians tried to live and tried to survive with Israeli with Israelis without so much violence, but it didn't work. In 1967, Israel occupied the rest of Palestine. In 1948, they occupied 80% of the land. In 1967, they occupied the rest of the land. And that's when the Palestinian resistance started, military resistance. So basically, occupation is an action and offense. Resistance starts with an RE. That's why it's a resistance, reaction. The first Palestinian suicide bombing attack happened in 1994, 6 months after a massacre that was committed by Baruch Goldstein inside the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron, where he went in, he shot and killed 29 people inside the mosque, and 25 other people were killed outside by the Israeli soldiers and settlers. 6 months later, the first Palestinian suicide bombing attack happened. Why? People didn't have any other means to fight. The last suicide bombing attack happened probably, 10, 15 years ago or something. It stopped not because of the wall, and it didn't stop because of Israel wanting it to stop or because Palestinians are afraid. No, it stopped because Palestinians have found another mean to fight. They managed to launch things without dying. Launch the rockets, for example. For instance, today, when somebody like me, and there are many people like me calling for peace, calling for non-violent resolving for this conflict, and we get blocked, we get attacked by Israeli Mossad groups like 8,200, which is the main Israeli group that is attacking technology and using technology to attack Palestinians and to publish propaganda against us. When they try to silence people that are speaking about peace, how do you expect people believing in peace? If they don't give the chance to people who ask for peaceful resolving of the conflict, why should people still believe in peace? I believe in peace. I will die believing in peace. I don't believe in violence the first day, the last day, to the end of my life. I don't believe in violence. It's not going to be a solution. And if it is solving anything, it's going to be a very bloody solution. I hate blood. But Israel is not giving the people any other option. Every time the people tend to go towards peaceful agreements and negotiation, Israel ignored them. Imagine, if you were a Palestinian and you have two ways in front of you, Fatah and Abbas in Ramallah, Hamas in Gaza. Fatah has negotiated Israel for the last 30 years. What is left from the West Bank is smaller than what is left from Gaza, while Gaza is way smaller than the West Bank. While Gaza, that have fought with violence, has no checkpoints inside it. So when people look at this, they see that Israel have gifted violence by leaving Gaza and punished peacefulness by staying in the West Bank and even taking more of it. So when people see that, negotiations leads to nowhere and violence makes a result, even if it's a bloody result, they would think that violence wins. And that's all the fault of Israel. Hamas is popular today because Israel made it so. So I blame Israel for the growing power of the violent resistance Palestinian groups, because non-violent Palestinian groups couldn't gain anything. The hatred is the normal result for not knowing, for not meeting, for oppressing.
这就是 Salah 的讲述。通过他的讲述，我们可能比以前更能够理解为什么巴以冲突会不断的卷土重来，而普通人却对此无能为力。是否有一天双方都能够有着更有远见的政治家来抛却仇恨、前嫌和利益纠葛，达成更好的安排？现在看起来也遥遥无期。最后，感谢听众们在上一期给我们不同视角的评论，并且督促我们更加中立和公允。感谢听众蔡小媛积极给我们联系当地的嘉宾，也感谢我们生动活泼的小伙伴，包括内容监制 Amanda、后期制作 Kurt 和中文配音 Luke， 还有我们的设计师饭团、运营刘瑶。 他们在这一期中都花了比之前节目更多的时间来呈现这期节目。我们也期待听到大家更多的反馈和对我们的建议。大家可以在各大平台给我们写评论，也可以给我们写邮件。我们的邮箱是 etwstudio@gmail.com etwstudio@gmail.com。 那我们下期节目再见。And I just want to say thank you and be safe.
Being safe is not something you can decide alone in this. You can stay away from things, but you can't guarantee that you will stay safe. It's not a free country.